बना है शाह का मुसाहिब, फिरे है इतराता। बना है शाह का मुसाहिब, फिरे है इतराता, वगरना शहर में गालिब की आबरू क्या है।
Shah Jahanabad, or Old Delhi, the great capital of the Mughal Empire, founded by the 5th Mughal Emperor of India, Shah Jahan, in 1639. The emperor resided in the Red Fort. In front of the fort, the main street was Chandni Chowk. It had a canal running through it. There were gardens around. It became the grandest market in all of India. This was the Mughal capital till the demise of the empire in 1857.
When the British took over, the grandeur of Chandni Chowk continued. They built the Delhi Town Hall in 1863. It was the seat of the Municipal Corporation of Delhi. The rich and the royal lived around here. Their mansions are called Havelis. But what is the condition of the Havelis today?
There were over 300 Havelis in Shah Jahanabad, rechristened Old Delhi by the British. The British destroyed some of the Havelis during the 1857 mutiny. But the real damage has been happening since independence in 1947. Refugees from Pakistan came over. The Havelis started changing hands, getting divided and subdivided. Shops and commercial establishments crept up in and around the Havelis. There was no planning, no monitoring. The government has just been looking on, while our history, art and architecture has been fading away. There are few Havelis left intact today. Most are in shambles. The greatest tragedy is the 19th century residence of the ruler of Sardana, Begum Samru.
Begum Samru's palace is one of Delhi's grandest houses. It was a white mansion with huge columns and large halls. It had a very graceful front porch. It was surrounded by gardens with beautiful fountains in it. Begum Samru's palace was an architectural marvel. But this is what we have done to it today.
Begum Samru Palace is now called Bhagirat Palace after businessman Said Bhagirat bought it in 1940. His family has been leasing the property out to traders and shopkeepers. Together they've destroyed the palace. It has become an electrical and pharmaceutical wholesale market. The facade of the building has been ruined. The great European columns are wearing out. There are electrical wires crisscrossing the whole site. The elegant porch has been defaced beyond recognition. It's crowded, horrible. The grand stairs leading to the porch has a board declaring this to be a heritage building. But look at what's right next to the heritage board. This is the story of this historical building. And look at the attitude of the shopkeepers who've leased the premises.
यहाँ आपको लगता है ये सफाई सुथरा है या?
बिल्कुल साफ सुथरा है, कोई इसमें गंदगी नहीं है, ये हम गारंटी देते हैं। बिल्कुल साफ सुथरा है, यहाँ का मैनेजमेंट, यहाँ के लोग, व्यापारी लोग बिल्कुल साफ सुथरा रखते हैं। जब घर से ही साफ सुथरा नहा धो के आते हैं तो यहाँ पर क्या करें, गंदगी मचाएंगे? ठीक है ना?
The shopkeepers at Begum Samru's palace think the mess is funny, but that's because they don't even know the importance of where they're standing.
ये जो बोर्ड है उसमें लिखा है ये हेरिटेज बिल्डिंग है, पुराना ऐतिहासिक बिल्डिंग है।
हमें कुछ पता नहीं है भैया, नाम मान पर गवार है। हम इनके बारे में कुछ नहीं जानते।
आपको मालूम है ये बेगम समरू का पैलेस होता था?
नहीं मालूम है मुझे।
आपको मालूम?
नहीं।
आपको मालूम?
नो सर।
आपको मालूम?
नो।
Begum Samru lived from 1753 to 1836. She was of slight stature and fair complexion. Her ancestors were Kashmiri. The Begum was known to be a very charming, very interesting character.
Begum Samru started off as a Noach girl, but she married a mercenary soldier from Luxembourg who operated in India. After he died, she inherited his army and the Principality of Sardana and UP. She is now a commander and a ruler, and very quickly she proved her mettle. She's brave on the battlefield, feared by her enemies who thought she'd cast a spell on them as a witch.
She became enormously influential in the last 10-15 years of the Mughal Empire because the Mughal Emperor looked up to her for guidance as to what was happening. She had her own little army, and Shah Alam was the only Mughal Emperor who actually came from the Red Fort behind us on an elephant procession to Begum Samru's palace to watch the Nautch girls perform.
Begum Samru and her palace have been associated with several Mughal emperors. Akbar Shah II gifted the palace to her, And the last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah II, is said to have stayed here after the British captured him for his involvement in the 1857 mutiny. He was later exiled to Burma. The palace is hugely significant, not just for its history, but also for its architecture.
The Begum Samru Palace is unique. It's a building that is actually hugely influenced by European architecture. So unlike all the other Havelis which are inward looking, the Begum Samru Palace has these large columns inspired by the classical orders of Europe. And yet it is built in a very traditional setting. So architecturally, I can't even begin to describe how significant it is.
But if the facade of Begum Samru's palace is in a shocking state today, the inside is actually worse. You probably can't imagine it, but look at this. The large elegant halls have completely vanished. Instead, there are small little shops, one next to the other, over 80 of them. The large hallways are gone. Instead, there are dingy, narrow corridors with electrical wiring hanging dangerously overhead. Look at the internal staircase. It's another rubbish dump. The walls are thick, red with pan. If you go to another floor, it's the same story.
But all of you are throwing the mess over here. There's so much kooda kabar everywhere.
Yes, yeah. It is so much of encroachment. Passage is not even clear. It was a 6-feet passage.
But then I'm saying that all of you are responsible for it as well.
We are responsible. We are a responsible Indian, so we are responsible for all this mess created over here. ये सब ऐसे ही चलता है. Nobody is bothered. Nobody is bothered. चलता है.
Sunil Raman is a heritage expert. He takes diplomats, corporate honchos and tourists for heritage walks in Old Delhi. He describes the reactions of people when they see the state of Begum Samru's palace.
They come to Begum Samru's place and short of crying, and then I tried to build a beautiful picture of what world was like in middle of the 19th century when Begum Samru used to dance here and Shah Alam came here. It's very difficult for them to visualize when they see these hideous shops all over the place. They say, why is it not maintained?
The reason Begum Samru's palace is not maintained is because nobody is bothered. The owners are not bothered. The tenant shopkeepers certainly don't care. And the Delhi government and the Archaeological Survey of India, the ASI, have turned a blind eye as well. Ratish Nanda is a leading conservation architect.
The problem is we are not attaching any great economic value to these buildings, and to get all of these shopkeepers out and relocate them or buy off their little square footage and use the Haveli as a single space is far too much of an effort for any commercial businessman.
Nanda says a private businessman will not invest in turning over Begum Samru's palace. But what about civil society and the state? He says India is a place with enviable heritage, but we don't value it. Nanda points out that Europe survives because of its heritage and tourism. But in India, we are not able to assign economic value to our heritage.
I mean, nobody can really tell you the value of Begum Samru's palace. It's enormous monetary value. Is it not enough value for some government department to come in and say, we will create a small shopping arcade for all these shops over here, relocate them into a more important space and get them to vacate this place so that it can be preserved for posterity?
The story of Begum Samru's palace is the story of sheer neglect. It's a colossal loss of history, art and architecture. Who will save it? At the moment, it's going into oblivion. The words of the shopkeeper who occupies part of the building says it all.
पुरानी बिल्डिंग है, बिल्डिंग क्या मजबूत है कि कुछ गिरने का डर है?
ना 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 बहुत मजबूत है. इसका जो पिलर है ना, आप देख ही रहे हो. देखो कितने बड़े-बड़े पिलर हैं. इतने पिलर तो कहीं आज लाल किले के अंदर
बड़े तो है पर छेद है पिलरों में.
छेद नहीं, वो डिजाइन बना हुआ है. वो डिजाइन बना जो महारानी जहाँ रहती थी ना, उसको जो छेद वाले डिजाइन पसंद थे. बेगम समरू उसको जो अच्छे लगते थे.
हर एक बात पे कहते हो तुम कि तू क्या है, तुम ही कहो कि ये अंदाज़े गुफ्तगू क्या है.
If Begum Samru's palace is a story of neglect, Mirza Ghalib's Haveli is an example of positive action. This great Urdu poet was born in Agra in 1797, but he lived his last years from 1860 till his death in 1869 in this Haveli in Old Delhi.
Mirza Ghalib is considered the greatest Urdu poet of all time. In fact, eminent British scholar Ralph Russell once said, if Ghalib had written in English, he would have been the greatest poet of all time among all languages. And Ghalib was very aware of his talents. Look at this verse of his. He writes, "Who is the Ghalib, she queries now? Can ignorance be so feigned? Would be someone tell me what to say so that the pretense is maintained."
Ghalib's 19th century Haveli unfortunately had a rotten time in the 20th century. This is a photograph of the inside of the Haveli in 1995. It was a heater factory. It's shocking beyond belief. Fortunately, Ghalib lovers and the media put constant pressure on the Delhi government. In 1999, the state government acted. It acquired a part of the Haveli and started restoration. In 2000, the work was done, and the Haveli was thrown open to the public.
इसको देखकर ना ऐसा महसूस होता है कि जैसे हमारी पुरानी यादें ना ताज़ा हो गई हैं मिर्ज़ा गालिब की, और जो इनके शेर हैं बहुत अच्छे लिखते थे, शेर वगैरह बहुत अच्छे लगे हमें.
There is one room which has a bust of Ghalib. It also has an illustrative representation of Ghalib's work. Most of the poet's original writings were destroyed during the 1857 revolt. There is also a replica of Ghalib's attire and one of his wife, Umrao Begum, as well. Umrao Begum was 12 when she married Ghalib, who was 13. She was apparently a loving, obedient wife. But Ghalib felt she did not fully appreciate his poetry, and so he didn't fully appreciate her. They had 7 children, but none survived. There is a second room in this Haveli. This is a larger space. It has a life size of Ghalib sitting, writing poetry. It really looks real.
ये तो भावना की चीज़ है. बहुत अच्छा लगा कि कम से कम इतने बड़े शायर के इतना दिन से हम दिल्ली आते थे जाते थे, लेकिन इस शायर के दर पर हम पहुंचने वाले थे, तो हमको लगा कि नहीं, बहुत बड़ा काम आज हो गया हमारा.
Mirza Ghalib's Haveli has lots of information and replicas based on the poet's life. There is a family tree. There are replica utensils of the kind used during Ghalib's time. There is a board informing us of his favorite dishes: shammi kebabs, mangoes, mishri after meals. And then of course his verses. Ghalib was one of the wittiest poets of all time. Sample this: "Though I be madly in love with you, do not call it madness and frown. And should it be madness, don't forget, it brought you your renown."
Mirza Ghalib was a very colorful man. He was a ladies' man. He was a gambler. In fact, he was arrested twice for it. He loved his hookah. He was also an alcoholic, and he justified it to his very devout wife by writing, "Either allow me to drink in a mosque or show me a place where God isn't around."
Ghalib's Haveli has been restored keeping in mind the Mughal era. Look at the arches, then the bricks, Mughal Lahori bricks, a speciality of the time. Sandstone has also been used, and a wooden entrance door.
हाँ, पुराने मुगल टाइम जैसा फीलिंग आ रहा है.
But there's a twist in the tale. There are only 2 rooms in Ghalib's Haveli which have been restored. The rest of the Haveli is still in shambles. Look at this. In between the 2 restored rooms is a PCO booth. And then if you climb up the dingy stairs to the first floor, there are dirty green walls. There are families living in the rooms here. The terrace, it's a mess. The building walls are chipping away. There is rubbish lying around. When visitors come, they wonder what's going on.
जैसे कि मुझे अभी पता लगा, जो यहाँ के सिक्योरिटी गार्ड हैं, उन्होंने मुझे बताया कि ये 500 गज की हवेली है और जिसमें से सिर्फ 135 गज ही अभी सरकार ले पाई है.
This is the problem. The Delhi government only acquired a part of Ghalib's Haveli for restoration. Most of the property is subdivided and in other people's hands. This leaves Mirza Ghalib lovers with very mixed feelings.
Not happy, at the same time happy, because at least something has been done. But otherwise, I mean, you haven't created the place at all. You haven't recreated the Haveli of Ghalib because you have allowed the STD booth to be there. Get rid of those people, reallocate them from Ghalib's Haveli. Then you use the expertise of INTAC and art historians and people who specialize in architecture of that period to recreate parts of the Haveli. You can't have a single room and say it was a Haveli of Ghalib.
This may be one of the reasons why the genius Urdu poet's home attracts few visitors. The government has only restored 2 rooms. Ratish Nanda says the state requires a bigger vision. They need to work not just on the rest of the Haveli, but around it as well.
I think the whole neighborhood, Ghalib's Haveli is part of a much larger neighborhood. His in-laws stayed just down the road in the same lane. A persona such as Ghalib has the ability to even today attract thousands of people. And with these people comes economic opportunities for local communities.
This site also has huge potential to host events, Ghalib events, poetry festivals, ghazal evenings. We need to make a living space out of this old Haveli. Ratish Nanda says this in fact is a problem with most of our heritage sites. We are not using them, we are just viewing them. Who's to blame for this?
Number one, the government for not making our heritage sites as accessible for our modern living as they are elsewhere in the world. I mean, you go to Edinburgh Castle, every day there'll be an event to attract children. Over here, nothing. 500,000 children come every year to Humayun's tomb. They just walk through it like wild geese and come out. Nothing, no experience sharing. Simultaneously, I think the education system, even though we live amongst heritage, it's not integrated with the whole system of teaching children. And then, of course, parents and who are not initiating children into the heritage of the city from the onset, as is done the world over.
Mirza Ghalib's Haveli is a story of work half done. A lot more is required to restore this slice of India's history. And it should be done. Ghalib was not just a great poet, he was one of the greatest poets of all time. In fact, he himself said, "Though many indeed have made their mark in the practice of poetry's art, Ghalib, they say, with his way with words, stands in a class apart." The government may be struggling with the Havelis of Old Delhi, but one person is not. Deoki Nandan Bagla, the owner of the Seth Ram Lal Khemka Haveli near Kashmiri Gate. This is listed as a Grade 2 heritage building, and there is something very exciting happening over here.
The Seth Ram Lal Khemka Haveli must have been a statement of power and wealth when it came up in the 1840s. It's a 9,000 square feet Haveli. It changed several owners before Seth Ram Lal bought it in 1905. He was a very rich, respectable cloth merchant.
Seth Ram Lal Khemka was the president of the Chandni Chowk Traders Association from 1905 to 1958. He was also the president of the Delhi Hindustani Mercantile Association for over 2 decades. His sister's grandson is Deoki Nandan Bagla. Bagla and his wife and son still live in this Haveli. This is exceptional because many Haveli owners have commercialized their buildings and moved out to less crowded parts of Delhi.
I wanted to keep my family's legacy alive here. If I leave this Haveli, it will be gone into rust like other Havelis in Chandni Chowk, which I didn't want to do. I just wanted to keep it alive by retaining it.
Bagla also says that living in a Haveli gives the family space. And then there's a matter of respect. His family is known in this part of Delhi and the locals acknowledge it.
Normally when I go in the morning, they give me salams. So you get, that feeling that you belong to a good family.
After making a decision to continue living here, the Baglas then decided to restore the Haveli. It needed it, but there was a motivated reason as well.
In fact, no work has been done for last 40-50 years. It was in a very shamble condition. So I just wanted, as I'm living here and my children are yet to be married, I'm looking for brides. I've got 3 sons, young sons.
So you decided to restore the Haveli?
Yeah, so that if daughter-in-laws come, they stay in a reasonable modern house.
And you get better brides.
Better brides, definitely.
The Baglas then roped in conservation architect Aishwarya Tipnis. Tipnis says this is an incredibly exciting project, and the Haveli is a wonderful representation of Delhi's history and architecture.
If you look at the grand archway outside as well as these pointed arches here, these are actually what is dating back from the Mughal times, and these colonial sort of big doors, the fireplaces, the jack arches are the more colonial elements that were added maybe in the 1920s, that sort of thing. And then of course there have been incremental changes that we see on the upper floors that are 1950s and 60s and 70s.
Tipnis began the restoration in November 2013. Currently, half the property is being restored. Once that's finished, the other half will be taken up. A critical decision in the process has been to use the original material with which the Haveli is made, lime, instead of cement. And to make the lime, a special chakki has been set up in the courtyard of the Haveli.
Heritage buildings across the world are built with a material called lime. That is, before cement used to be invented, all buildings were constructed with lime. Now, the age that we are standing in today, lime is considered to be a very cumbersome process, so everybody has moved on to cement. Now, what that does to a heritage building like this is incompatibility. So, we had water seepage almost till 8 feet in this drawing room because of use of cement plaster on a lime-based building.
The drawing dining hall of the Haveli is a large space. It's being restored to bring out the classical feel of the place. There'll be a black and white checkered flooring like the one earlier. The mantelpiece and fireplace are being restored. There's a lot of work going on in the drawing dining. Compare this to what the hall looked like earlier. Meanwhile, the kitchen is nearly done as well.
We've been able to give them all what a modern contemporary kitchen would have. So we have the built-in hobs, the ovens, the state-of-the-art chimneys, as well as create a classical look with the historic tiles pattern replicated, as well as the timber detailing for the classical kitchen recreated. So we've been able to marry the modern contemporary needs with an aesthetic that is in keeping with the Haveli.
The bedrooms are being spruced up as well. Ventilators have been opened up. The floor tiles are 1920 style, especially made in Mumbai. The bathrooms are another area of focus. This is the condition they had fallen to, and this is how the bathrooms are now being redone.
Our aim throughout the project has been to create a 21st century dwelling unit within a historic envelope that respects the historic envelope, yet the owner should at no point of time feel that, we should have just gone to the suburbs and build a house for us. We are giving them every comfort possible within the historic building.
The best part of this restoration process is that it's being done very economically. This is possible because of the use of local natural materials like lime with which the Haveli was originally made. The process is more cumbersome but is cheaper and longer lasting. The owner, Mr. Bagla, is confident that the next 2 generations of his family will need to spend next to nothing on the property now. The lesson to be learned from this Haveli is that while restoration preserves history, it can also be practical and economical. And hopefully, Mr. Bagla's wish of finding better brides for his sons will also come true.
Hemant, I hope whoever you marry will be happy with all of this.
Definitely. She'll be looking forward to a spacious house.
She'll be a Sethani.
Yes, of course she'll be.